What if you lost $10,000 because of a bad investment? You'd be furious, right? You would be so you would swear to yourself you're never going to make that mistake again. But what if I told you most people are losing hundreds, if not millions of dollars by simply making these simple mistakes every single day? Here to break this down with us is Chief Investment Officer with Concenture Wealth Management, Mike Alexander. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Hey, you bet. Happy to be here today.
Today we're going to cover the fact that bad information or even no information at all really is a silent killer to a lot of people's ability to be able to be financially secure. And we've got a guide on our website that walks you through these 4 simple things that you can do. We're not talking about complicated strategies, but the walks you through 4 simple things that you can go through to do and avoid feeling like you've made a big mistake. And so, Mike, let's start off this. Let's start this off, I guess is a better way to say that, with the myth. Mike, let's start this off talking about the myth of the big mistake. Most people assume that wealth loss comes from that one tragic mistake. They put all the money on black and they lost everything. They took unnecessary risks. But in reality, it's really those small, slow ignorance that ends up killing people, right? We're going to have to do that one again. Most people assume it's that big loss, that taking that unnecessary risk, putting all the money on black, that ends up costing them their financial future. But in reality, it's really slow ignorance, lack of doing things, and small things that end up being far more dangerous, don't you think?
I agree. It's usually the little things. And by the way, it's, when you're doing well, it's also the little things as well.
That's exactly right. So let's talk about that big math, that big myth, right? The reality is the way that you avoid that big myth is by being educated and understanding about it, but it's also being keenly aware of what you have, like the credit card debt. Right? A lot of people think that having credit card debt, I need to have credit card debt because that boosts my credit rating. That's not reality, right? The idea of living paycheck to paycheck, and that's you can't do that either, right?
No. I think the thought process behind it is, and I think you're kind of touching on this right now, is debt management is extraordinarily important. There are what you would call positive debts, if you will, and there are kind of the negative debts. History would suggest that, if you're going to take on debt, you would prefer to take on debt in things that appreciate. So that's one of the reasons why home ownership has always been important. But to your point, you want to avoid things that are like consumer debt. So to the degree that you can avoid debt on a depreciating item like an automobile, or certainly credit cards, which are utilized for personal items. That makes a lot of sense. Certainly building a credit rating makes a lot of sense as well. But you clearly want to be able to manage that effectively as well and pay off that debt, as quickly as possible.
The number one truth when it comes to wealth killing is lack of education, understanding where and what that is. Most Americans were never taught the basics about savings rates, budgeting, tax deferred growth, and those kind of things. And there are a lot of myths out there. One of them I mentioned is about carrying credit card debt boosts your credit rating. That's not a fact. Walk through one common wrong belief that you wish we could absolutely erase.
I'll tell you the biggest one that I think we've kind of dealt with this, throughout our career, but a lot of it comes down to just the pure marketing of consumption. And what I mean by that is, when you think about almost every ad that you ever see is always save, save, save.
Right.
And it's along the lines of, if you come here and you buy this, you're going to save. And it is the juxtaposition of, of the term save, meaning to save money, I have to actually spend it. And I
That's right.
think people have grown up and, we've all grown up in this culture where we're constantly being, bombarded with this message of come here to save, buy this to save, do this to save, when it has nothing to do with saving. It has to do with spending.
That is so funny. And when hearing you say that reminded me of a story with my kids. We were on vacation, and my oldest son, who's now married, they had received a little bit of money, and they went and they spent this money. And I said, well, how much was that? They said, it didn't cost us anything. What do you mean it didn't cost you anything? Oh, we used the money from the gift that we received. And that's when I first heard the phrase girl math. I said, hold on. No. That costs you something. You no longer have that money. Girl math is a fallacy. It doesn't exist. You are spending the money, right? And the reality is that understanding about having a basic understanding about treating yourself like a bill, understanding what is an acceptable amount of debt to carry, understanding how these different things work and being educated in there really is the only cure. Understanding that girl math is a myth, and that being smart with your money and educated about what the potential is what makes the big difference. And the reality is that there are lots of ways that financial ignorance steals your financial future, right? A lot of people, and I'd like for you to talk about this, a lot of people forget about compounding. And especially when you're younger.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of, compound interest obviously is, I don't know which wonder of the world it is, but it's one of them certainly. And people forget again that, if I invest money today, the idea is that I'm going to have more of it tomorrow. And that the longer that I go forward in time, the greater that sum actually becomes. And so it's kind of like if you use the simple process of doubling, and if a dollar becomes two, then when it doubles again, it's four, and then it's eight. And it's amazing how quickly that actually grows over a period of time.
Well, and the same is true, right? Being ignorant about how financing works. We've talked a lot about debt today, or it seems like we have. But the reality is that using debt to finance your lifestyle actually traps you for decades, right? Using debts, overspending on credit cards for vacations or experience, or even just getting DoorDash 17 times a week, right? That traps your future. And you have to understand what you're sacrificing when you make those those choices. Hey, let's talk about how to turn it around. How do you go and stop these? What are some bit pieces that we can give people, maybe two or three that they can start doing right here, right now? I'll start, and then I like your take on this. One of the things is that, and I tell people this all the time, treat yourself like a bill. If you have a 401k, participate in that 401k and set it up so that every 6 months you're increasing your contribution until you reach the max. If you treat yourself like a bill, you will be amazed what little effect that has on your day-to-day living and your cost of living. And you'll be amazed at what the benefit is as you go down the road. What are some other things that you would say?
Well, that's a great one. I would say, making sure that you have a list of what I would call, and this goes within your budget, of wants and needs. There's a lot of things that I want to do, right? And those are kind of discretionary spending type things. And then there's the needs. These are the things I have to pay, whether it's my mortgage or my student loan or my automobile. Those are the things that are that are needs. And these are the things I have to do. And then the other things are the things I really want to do, and understanding the difference between the two.
And as you go through, you have to also understand, you have to prioritize the right dollars at the right time. Right. You may want that super fancy watch or that super fancy car. It may not, the answer may not be no. The smart person says the answer is not now, right? And go through and plan inside of there. You know, the reality is that we started this off talking about if you lost $10,000, you'd be devastated, you'd be angry, it was a bad mistake, and you say, I swear you would never go and make that same mistake again. The reality is taking risks is a part of life. I'll never forget, I was at a dinner party with a client, and I was sitting there talking with the client, and he goes, hey, look at, and there were a lot of other people that were hugely successful. He goes, look around. He goes, every single person inside of here has declared bankruptcy. Now, these people were wealthy people. He goes, here's what the difference is. What they did is that they bounced back from that mistake, that risk that they took, they learned from it, and they changed, whether it was starting a business or doing something else or getting educated or changed the way that they lived their lifestyle so that they didn't. And every single one of those people were able to go through to do that. So that's kind of a long-winded way of me saying is that I don't think that you need to worry about chasing that hot dot, that new cryptocurrency that's going to make everyone wealthy, that new tech stock or pharmaceutical company that is going to revolutionize the world. Yeah, there are things like that are going to happen, but the reality is being true to real strategies that really aren't that complex, treating yourself like a bill can make all the difference in the world. Simple behaviors over chasing these top secret strategies. The reality is there are no top secret strategies.
Well, you know, we talk about this all the time, Robert, in some of our conversations. There's a reason why people play, you know, the lottery, right? It's, you know, the thought process is, hey, there's an opportunity that, you know, I could become extraordinarily wealthy overnight. And the odds of me doing it are just as good as they are for anyone else.
Right. You know, but in this game, in the game that we're talking about, everyone can, if they're willing to have discipline, and that will give them the freedom that they want. There's a lot of opportunities inside there, and the reality is that you don't need to have a PhD. You just need to be disciplined. You need to have priorities. You need to budget, and you need to treat yourself like a bill.
Absolutely.
With that, Mike, I'd like to say thank you for joining us again this week. Look forward to continuing the conversations. And to everyone, make sure you check out the guide that we have on ours that really is focused around how do you avoid these unnecessary mistakes and how do you go through and avoid making those mistakes that cost you $10,000.